people's reactions are so like visceral and strong. What is it about taking someone's car, obviously?
You know, when you take somebody's vehicle, man, they get hot on the Billy Goat's butt and the pepper patch. I mean, that's just, you know.
Just as I would have said it myself. Hotter than a Billy Goat's butt and a pepper patch.
Sure.
After Lizard Lick towing ended, most people assumed Ron Shirley stepped away. But that's not what happened. Ron was at the center of Lizard Lick towing as the larger-than-life repo man who built a business and a following through sheer personality and grit. But after the cameras stopped in 2014, his life took turns that many fans never saw coming. So what really happened to Ron Shirley after Lizard Lick towing? And how did his life change in the years after the show ended? Join us as we uncover the real story of Ron Shirley and where he is today, the man behind the show. Ron Shirley did not stumble into the towing business by accident. He grew up in North Carolina with a mother who was a Christian and a father who was not, and by his own account, he drifted away from the church himself when he was 18. He went to college and played football, which was the path a lot of young men in the South took in that era. And a football injury ended that chapter before it could develop into anything. He turned to the automotive world after that, working his way up through the industry the hard way, learning engines and mechanics not from a program, but from the experience of doing the work until he understood it. In the spring of 1998, Ron and his wife, Amy, started Lizard Lick Towing and Recovery with a single truck. The business was based in the tiny community of Lizard Lick, a small, unincorporated area near the Raleigh suburb of Wendell in Johnston County, North Carolina. The name Lizard Lick itself comes from a nearby mill that processed tobacco, and the community had been there long before anyone thought of putting it on television. Ron grew the business by doing the work honestly and consistently. Within 10 years of that first truck, Lizard Lick Towing and Recovery had a fleet of 20 vehicles, 15 staff members, and was servicing 9 counties across the region. That kind of growth, in a decade, from scratch, in a small rural community, does not happen without someone who knows how to run an operation. Ron was not a television personality who happened to own a tow truck. He was a businessman who happened to end up on television. Amy Shirley is the vice president of the company and has been from the beginning. She is also a former world champion powerlifter who held 2 junior world records, a woman who competed in mixed martial arts while appearing on the show, and someone who worked as a mortician on the side. The True TV executive who first saw the couple described them as dynamic and entertaining characters. Ron himself gave a simpler account of how the show got started. A cameraman came down to shoot for one day. That same day, someone shot at the cameraman. And from that point on, everyone understood there was a show there. Ron was, from the very beginning of his public life, an ordained pastor. He held the title of evangelist and served as the mayor pro tem of Lizard Lick while the show was in production. He described the hardest part of the towing business not as the physical danger, though there was plenty of that, but as the daily challenge of loving people who were being difficult. That phrase, loving people who are being difficult, is the entire philosophy of a man who is simultaneously repossessing someone's vehicle and praying for their well-being. It is not a contradiction for Ron Shirley. It is just how he has always operated. So what did the show actually look like? Why did it work? And what happened to Ron when it ended in 2014? The beginning and end of Lizard Lick. The Lizard Lick towing crew first appeared on True TV through a show called All Worked Up, which ran from 2009 to 2011 and featured various high-stakes jobs across the country. The Lizard Lick segment proved consistently popular with viewers, and the network developed a dedicated series for the Shirleys and their team. The show premiered on February 7, 2011. It ran for 4 full seasons, 91 episodes total, before the series finale aired on August 18, 2014. The format was straightforward, and the appeal was genuine. Ron and his crew, most notably his longtime co-worker Bobby Brantley, went out and repossessed vehicles from people who had defaulted on their loans. The catches were that the people whose vehicles were being taken did not always respond calmly to this development, that North Carolina has specific laws around vehicle repossession that create friction in real time, and that Ron Shirley and Bobby Brantley were 2 of the most watchable people on cable television. Bobby had what the show described as a short fuse and no people skills, which is a gentle way of saying that Bobby was the one who got into brawls while Ron stayed in the truck working the radio. The dynamic between them, Ron, the steady hand, and Bobby, the volatile engine, gave the show a comedic structure that kept audiences coming back. Ron was notably consistent in his on-screen behavior in a way that the show's producers clearly found both useful and unusual. In all the dozens of rough and chaotic episodes the show produced, he was never once seen swearing on camera or throwing a punch. "That's Bobby's job," he said in an interview, holding himself to a standard consistent with his faith and his pastoral role, even while navigating the kind of confrontations that most people would struggle to navigate without losing their composure. He wrote poetry that appeared on the True TV website and also worked on a lizard lick towing cookbook at the same time as the show was airing. He had more going on internally than the format of a repo-based reality show could fully accommodate. The show captured the surface of Ron Shirley very well. It did not have quite enough time or space to show everything underneath it. Season 3 premiered in June 2012 with 2.7 million viewers. That is a significant number for a cable reality show in that era, and it confirmed that the Lizard Lick audience was not just casual viewers, but people who had committed to these characters across multiple seasons. The show was renewed for a 4th season, which premiered in December 2013 and concluded in August 2014. True TV did not renew it for a 5th. The specific reasons for the cancellation were never publicly confirmed by the network. Some fans speculated that the show had become too staged, pointing to moments that felt scripted and rehearsed in ways the earlier seasons had not. Others pointed to external circumstances. What was confirmed is that the Shirley family continued to run Lizard Lick Towing and Recovery after the cameras left, without any formal goodbye from the network, and that both Ron and Amy remained active in their community and their business as though the show had been a chapter rather than the whole story. What does Ron Shirley's faith life actually look like? And what has he built in the years since Lizard Lick Towing finished? The life the cameras missed. Ron Shirley has been an ordained minister since well before Lizard Lick Towing made his name known outside North Carolina. Faith was not something Ron wore as a costume for the cameras. It was the framework through which he made sense of his work, his family, and his community. When he came back to it, which he did, he came back with the kind of commitment that tends to follow a genuine absence rather than a comfortable continuity. After the show ended, Ron deepened his pastoral role. He serves as the pastor of the Eastern chapter of Dirt Church, a church that operates with the specific energy and language of people who work with their hands, who have spent their lives in trucks and fields and shops, and who approach faith through the lens of that life rather than through the formal architecture of a traditional congregation. Ron describes himself as an evangelist by grace, and uses that specific phrase in his official role at the company. The Dirt Church model, which has chapters in several states, is built around accessibility. The idea that faith should be available to people who have never felt at home in a traditional church building, people who respond to a preacher who talks like he has changed his own oil and repossessed someone's truck and prayed through difficulty rather than around it. Ron also channels his public platform into advocacy through Missiles for Christ Ministry, a ministry that focuses specifically on supporting abuse survivors and people struggling with addiction. He has spoken about the ministry in connection with his faith community work, and it represents the other half of what he was doing even during the show's run, a pastoral calling that existed alongside the repo work and the cameras and the chaos of 4 seasons of true TV production. The towing business and the ministry are not separate departments of his life. They are the same life expressed through different forms. The same man who spent 10 years driving through Johnston County at night to repossess vehicles from people who had stopped making payments is the same man who gets up on Sunday morning and talks to a congregation about forgiveness and resilience and the specific mercy available to people who have made every mistake there is to make. Amy has continued as Vice President of Lizard Lick Towing and Recovery, managing the operational side of the business while also building her own public presence through the company's social media channels. She published a cookbook called Gluten Free in Lizard Lick, which is the kind of project that only someone with a genuine personality behind their public image produces. She has continued to post updates about the family, the business, and their community. Ron and Amy have 3 children together, a son named Gabe, and daughters Lexi and Maggie. Ron also has a son named Alex from a previous relationship, who grew up as part of the Shirley family. Alex is the name that connects to the part of this story that changed everything in 2022. The cameras had gone, but the work had not stopped. And then February 17th, 2022 arrived. What happened that night is the part of Ron Shirley's story that most people who search his name are looking for, and it is the part that tells you the most about who he actually is. The night that changed the family. Harley Alexander Shirley, known to his family and friends as Alex, turned 21 years old on February 17th, 2022. He was Ron Shirley's son from a previous relationship, raised within the Shirley family, and by the accounts of everyone who knew him, he was a young man who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time on the worst possible night. He had gone out that evening to attend a memorial balloon release in Garner, North Carolina, a gathering to honor a friend named Xavier Smith, who had died in a car crash, attending a memorial for a dead friend. That is the context in which Alex Shirley was killed. 2 teenagers, 16-year-old Nathan Christopher Jackson and 17-year-old Joshua Christopher Stewart, both identified by prosecutors as members of the 9 Trey Bloods gang, approached a parked car at a Sheetz gas station on Josephine Road in Johnston County and opened fire. They fired 20 shots into the back of the vehicle. Alex Shirley, sitting in the back seat on the driver's side, was the intended target according to prosecutors. He died at the scene. Sophie Catherine Hagee, 20 years old, was sitting next to Alex. She was not the intended target. She was shot and was permanently paralyzed from the waist down. 3 other people were in the vehicle at the time. They were not hit by the gunfire, though one sustained non-life-threatening injuries. On the night of a memorial for one dead friend, another young man was killed and a young woman was left in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. Ron Shirley posted on Facebook the following day. He was a man who had spent his entire adult life finding words for difficult situations as a preacher, as a parent, and as someone who had dealt with human hardship in its most raw forms through 20 years of running a towing and recovery operation. The words he found for February 18th, 2022 were these: "Harley is at peace now, waiting on the rest of us to arrive at those gates. We will be there soon, Big Sure, and we'll always cherish the times we had while you were with us, son." He called the shooter a coward on social media in the days following the murder. He did not use stronger language than that. He is a pastor, and a pastor's language has specific limits, even in the worst moments. Alex's mother, Christy Lee, described the impact of her son's death in terms that do not require additional commentary. "It has actually decimated my world," she told WRAL News at the courthouse after the sentencing. "I still say goodnight to an empty bedroom. I text his cell phone. The dogs still go into his room looking for him every day." A GoFundMe created for Sophie Hagee, the young woman paralyzed in the same shooting, raised more than $80,000 from people who had seen what happened and wanted to do something about it. Sophie's mother said at sentencing, "Committing crimes in a split second is not worth it because people's lives are changed forever." They are, and the people in that parked car on Josephine Road on the night of February 17th, 2022, know that in the most permanent way imaginable. While the incident happened in February 2022 and the arrests came within weeks, the legal process that followed stretched out across more than 3 years, with 2 separate court proceedings and 2 separate sentencing hearings. What happened in the courtroom? What did Ron say when it was over? And what does the verdict mean for a man whose entire life has been built around the idea of forgiveness? The trial, the sentences, and the word forgiveness. The legal process in the death of Alex Shirley moved through the North Carolina courts across 2 tracks, one for each shooter. Joshua Christopher Stewart was the first to resolve his case. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and attempted murder on September 6, 2023, and was sentenced in July 2025. He received consecutive sentences totaling approximately 18 to 22 years and 8 months, plus 11 years and 9 months to 15 years and 2 months. Stewart had been 17 years old at the time of the shooting, which meant the sentencing guidelines that apply to juvenile offenders were in effect. Nathan Christopher Jackson went to trial. He was convicted of first-degree murder, attempted murder, felony discharging a firearm into an occupied vehicle resulting in serious bodily injury on 2 counts, and felony discharging a firearm into an occupied vehicle on 3 further counts. He was sentenced in December 2024 to consecutive terms, including life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. Because Nathan was 16 years old when he committed the crimes, North Carolina law required that he serve a minimum of 40 years before becoming eligible for parole. Life with the possibility of parole after 40 years for crimes committed at 16. The Johnston County District Attorney Jason Waller said, "Such senseless acts of violence cannot and will not be tolerated in our community." It was the kind of statement district attorneys are required by the position to make. It was also true. Ron Shirley was at the courthouse for the sentencing. He spoke to journalists afterward, and what he said should be understood as a statement from a man who has spent his entire life building a framework for moments exactly like this one. He said, "If I leave this courthouse and this trial with anything else, I want people to know that you have to learn to forgive no matter what, and you have to learn to love no matter how hard." That is the sentence of a man who is not describing forgiveness as a feeling that arrived naturally. He is describing it as something you have to learn. Ron Shirley, publicly talking about the obligation to forgive the person who did it. That is not a performance. That is the full weight of a faith that has been tested. Alex Shirley's mother, Christy Lee, said something that deserves its own space in this story. She said, "It was not closure." She said, "You do not get closure when you have to bury your child and see the things she saw." She felt relief, she said, not closure. Closure is the word that people who have not buried a child tend to use. People who have buried a child use different words. Relief is one of them. The acknowledgement that it is not over that the bedroom is still empty, that the dogs still look for him. That is the honest language of grief, not the tidy language of narrative resolution. Do you think Ron Shirley deserves more recognition for the life he has built outside of the TV show? And what do you remember most from Lizard Lick Towing? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.